Paying your credit card on time does not automatically make you look low risk. That sounds wrong. It sounds unfair. But that is exactly how the system works. You can spend $1,000 on a card with a $5,000 limit, have the cash sitting in your bank account. Wait for the bill, pay the statement in full the second it arrives, pay zero interest, do everything a responsible person is supposed to do, and still watch your credit score drop. Not because you missed a payment. Not because you were reckless. Because the system took the picture before you cleaned the room. That's the part most people never learn. They think the due date is the only date that matters. It isn't. The due date protects you from interest and late fees. It does not control what the credit bureaus see. And if you don't understand that difference, the algorithm will judge you based on the worst snapshot of your month. That is the real problem. Today, I want to show you exactly how that snapshot works, why paying in full is not the same thing as reporting a low balance, why zero is not always optimal, and how moving your payment by just a couple of days can change what the system thinks about you. If you like this kind of content where we stop playing by the surface rules and start understanding the actual mechanics, subscribe, because most financial advice teaches behavior. Very little of it teaches plumbing. And with credit scores, the plumbing matters. Let's start with the lie almost everyone absorbs early. We are taught that the due date is sacred, pay by the due date. And you're doing it right, and to be fair, in one sense, that's true. If your goal is to avoid interest, avoid fees, and avoid a late mark, yes, the due date matters. But people take that rule and extend it too far. They assume that once they pay, the bureaus know immediately. They assume the scorer is watching a live feed. They assume if they wipe out a balance on the 15th, the report reflects that on the 16th. It usually doesn't. The credit scoring system is not a live stream, it's a snapshot system. That is the mindset shift. Your bank doesn't usually report your balance every day in real time to Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. In most cases, it reports the balance tied to your statement closing date, the day the billing cycle ends and the statement is generated. That's the number that gets frozen into your report for that cycle. That's the number the algorithm reacts to. Not the number you wish it saw. The number on the snapshot. So let's make this concrete. Say your billing cycle runs from the 1st to the 30th during that month. You use the card normally, groceries, gas, maybe a bigger purchase. By the 30th, your balance is $3,000 then the statement closes. The bank generates the bill, that $3,000 gets reported. Now maybe your due date isn't until the 20th of the next month. So on the 20th, you pay the entire $3,000. Great. You pay no interest. You've been perfectly responsible. But the bureaus already saw $3,000. That means your report still showed high utilization for that month, even though you paid in full and on time. This is where people get psychologically tripped up. Because in your mind, you did the right thing, your bank account confirms it, money left, bill paid. No interest, case closed. But the report says something different. The report says you were using a big chunk of your available credit, and the score reacts to that version of the story. That disconnect creates a lot of confusion. People see their score drop after a large purchase and start telling themselves all kinds of stories. Maybe the system is rigged. Maybe credit cards are dangerous. Maybe something is wrong with the app. Maybe it's identity theft. Usually it's simpler than that. The system is not broken. It's delayed. It is reporting yesterday's picture of you. And if you don't control when that picture is taken, you are letting the bank define your creditworthiness based on the messiest point in your month. That's why the core rule here is simple. Manage the statement date, not just the due date. That's the whole game. Not because the due date doesn't matter, it does, but the due date protects your wallet. The statement closing date shapes the data. And once you understand that, a lot of mysterious score drops stop being mysterious. Now, some people hear this and think, okay, but how much can that really matter if I owe $1? 0 versus $10, as long as I pay it, how big can the difference be? Potentially, very big. Because utilization is one of the fastest moving and most heavily weighted parts of your score. Payment history matters a lot, yes. But that takes time to build. Hard inquiries take time to age off. Utilization is different. Utilization can move quickly, hurt quickly, and recover quickly. That is why it's such a powerful lever. And the math is not complicated. The consequences are. Utilization is simply your balance divided by your limit. If you owe $500 on a card with a $1,000 limit, that card is at 50% utilization. If all your cards combined add up to $5,000 used out of $20,000 available, your overall utilization is 25%. Simple division. But the scoring impact is not linear in the way most people imagine. There are thresholds, and crossing the wrong threshold can make you look riskier, fast. A lot of people use 30% as the big line in the sand. Above that, the models start reading you as meaningfully more stressed. Get above 50%, and the signal gets uglier. Get close to maxed out. And now you're not just using credit. You're starting to look like someone under pressure. That matters because the system is built on probability, not fairness. Historically, people who run high balances are more likely to default than people who don't, so the score responds quickly when your utilization spikes. It doesn't wait for your story. It doesn't care that the purchase was strategic or temporary or fully backed by cash in your savings account. It just sees exposure. And here's the nuance: a lot of people miss. The model can care about both overall utilization and per card utilization. So even if your total available credit is high, one maxed out low limit card can still hurt you. You might have $50,000 in total limits across all accounts. Sounds great, but if one little card with a $500 limit is sitting at $490 when the statement cuts, that account can still flash distress. The algorithm doesn't just see your portfolio. It also sees the individual fires. That's why some people watch their score drop after putting a vacation or an appliance or some emergency expense on the wrong card, not because they became irresponsible overnight, because one account crossed a line on the wrong day. And the emotional reaction is predictable. People panic. They open the app 3 times. They assume there's been a mistake. Then they rationalize it away. But the logic is colder than that. The score is reacting to utilization, and utilization is reacting to the statement snapshot. That's why this next point is so important. Utilization, in the most commonly used scoring models like FICO8, is mostly memorals. That means if your utilization was ugly this month but clean next month, the old data point largely stops mattering. This is not like a mispayment that follows you for years. It's not a permanent scar. It is current state math. If you report 90% utilization in January and your score takes a hit, but you report 5% in February, the score can rebound quickly because the model is looking at the new snapshot. That is exactly why this timing rule is so powerful. You are not repairing a 7-year mistake. You are correcting a current data point. That is a very different kind of problem. Now here is where a lot of people oversimplify. They hear low utilization is good, and they immediately jump to, okay, then 0 must be best. No, not necessarily. And this is one of the most stubborn myths in this entire space. A lot of disciplined people take pride in showing a $0 balance on every card every month. They pay everything down early, the statements all cut at 0, and they think they've perfected the system. For peace of mind, maybe. For score optimization, not always. Because the model is not just asking, do you owe money? It's also asking, do you use credit? And do you manage it well? If every card reports 0 all the time, the algorithm gets less evidence of active, controlled use. You start to look almost invisible, clean, yes, but also uninformative. And in scoring, invisible is not always ideal. What tends to work best is a tiny reported balance, not high. Not dangerous, not enough to cost you interest, just enough to show active use without signaling stress. That's why people talk about the sweet spot. Not 0%, not 30%, usually very low single digits. If you want to squeeze out the most points, the classic strategy is AZEO all 0 except 1. The idea is simple. If you have multiple cards, you let most of them report $0, and you let one of them report a tiny balance, something like 1% of the limit, sometimes even just $10 or $20 depending on the card. What does that tell the algorithm? It says this person uses credit. This person is not avoiding the system. And this person is nowhere near trouble. That combination matters. Now, the moment people hear leave a balance, they get nervous. They think, wait, are you telling me to carry a balance and pay interest? No, absolutely not. This is where terminology confuses people. Reporting a balance is not the same thing as carrying a balance. That distinction is critical. If your statement closes with a $10 balance, that $10 gets reported, but you still have until the due date to pay it. As long as you pay that statement balance by the due date, you pay 0 interest. So you can report activity and still never finance debt. That is the needle you are threading. Low reported balance, 0 interest paid. And once you understand that, the system gets a lot less mysterious. So let's turn this into an actual operating procedure. If you want to optimize your score, especially before applying for a mortgage, auto loan, refinance, or anything where a few points could move your pricing, you cannot just hope Autopay handles this correctly. Autopay is built to prevent late payments. It is not built to optimize reported utilization. That's a different objective. So step 1, find the statement closing date for each card. Not the due date, the closing date. This is where a lot of people get lazy, or they trust the app too much. Most apps scream the due date at you because that is the behavior the bank wants. To find the closing date, you often need to open an actual statement PDF and look for statement closing date, billing cycle end, or similar language. Write those dates down. Put them in your calendar as repeating monthly reminders. If one card closes on the 15th, set a reminder for the 12th or 13th. Give yourself a buffer. Bank transfers can take time to post. You do not want to send the payment on the edge and miss the snapshot anyway. Step 2, on that reminder date, check the current balance. Let's say the card is sitting at $800, and you want it to report $10 then you make a manual payment of $790 before the statement closes. Not after, before. If that payment posts in time, the statement cuts with a $10 balance. That $10 is what gets reported, not the $800 you spent during the month. The $10 that survived into the snapshot. That is the difference between using credit and looking like you used almost none of it. Step 3, after the statement generates, confirm what it actually says. Open it, check it, make sure the new balance is the number you intended to report. If it says $10, great, that's your reported balance. Now all you have to do is make sure that $10 gets paid by the due date. And yes, if your Autopay is set to pay the statement balance, it may pull that amount automatically later, but do not assume. The first few times you run the system, verify everything manually. Because let's be clear, a late payment is far more damaging than a utilization optimization miss. Never trade a temporary score gain for a permanent mark on your file. Now, an important realism check. You do not need to micromanage every card every month forever. That is where some people go off the rails. Once they learn the mechanics, they become obsessive. They start checking balances like day traders. They try to keep every number perfect all the time. That's not necessary for most people. If you are not applying for credit anytime soon, the practical move is simpler. Keep utilization generally low, ideally under 10%, at minimum under 30%, and let life happen. Then, when you know you're within 30 to 60 days of a major application, that's when you tighten everything up. That's when you use the timing strategy deliberately. That's when you care about squeezing the last points out of the model. In other words, don't live in optimization mode year-round if you don't need to. Use precision when precision pays. Now let's talk about one way people take this too far and get themselves into trouble. It's called credit cycling. And this is where optimization turns into something that can actually make banks nervous. Say you have a $1.00 limit, you spend $1,000, pay it off mid-cycle. Spend another $1,000, pay it off again, then spend another $1.00 before the statement closes. From your perspective, you might think, what's the problem? In paying aggressively, irresponsible, the bank should love this. Not necessarily. From the bank's risk department, that can look like you are forcing more volume through the account than they intended to underwrite. They gave you a $1,000 limit for a reason. If you are effectively pushing $3,000 of spend through it in a single cycle, you are stretching their risk framework. And when banks see behavior that looks unusual, some of them do not applaud your discipline. They review you. Best case, nothing happens. Worst case, they freeze the account, request income documents, or shut it down. So, be careful. Paying down a balance before the statement date is fine. Repeatedly cycling a small limit to artificially create more spending capacity can look very different. If you keep finding yourself doing that, the answer is probably not a fancier payment trick. The answer is a higher limit. Ask for one. If you pay in full and you're constantly crowding the ceiling, a credit limit increase can solve the problem more cleanly than constant micromanagement ever will. A $2,000 purchase on a $20,000 limit is only 10%. Same purchase on a $2,500 limit is a very different signal. Bigger denominator, lower ratio. Less drama. While we're talking about denominator, here's another mistake people make: closing old cards because they want to simplify their finances. I understand the instinct. An old and used card feels pointless. It feels tidy to close it. But mathematically, you may be cutting away the exact thing helping your utilization stay low. If you close a card with a $10,000 limit and zero balance, your debt doesn't change. But your total available credit shrinks. That means the same balance on your other cards now produces a higher utilization ratio. You didn't become riskier in real life, but you became riskier on paper. That matters. So unless there is a strong reason to close an old card, fees, fraud concerns, something specific, think carefully before doing it. Sometimes an old inactive card is not clutter, sometimes it's ballast. Now, one more nuance for the future. The snapshot model is still dominant in many lending contexts, especially around common scoring setups like FICO8. That's why this strategy works so well right now. But newer scoring models, like trended data versions, can look beyond a single snapshot and see patterns over time. If you spend heavily every month and only slash balances at the last second before reporting, more advanced models may eventually get better at noticing that behavior. So this is not a license to live on the edge and cosmetically clean things up at buzzer forever. The strongest profile is still the obvious one. Genuine low-risk behavior. Low balances. Consistent payments. No chaos. The timing strategy helps because it aligns the report with reality. It should not become a mask for a fragile financial life. And that's the bigger point here. Most people think credit score advice is about being good. Be responsible, pay on time, don't be reckless. That advice is incomplete. Because the financial system is not just grading your morality, it is grading data. That means good behavior matters, yes. But how that behavior gets reported matters too. If you only learn the rules about fees and interest, you learn how not to get punished. If you learn the rules about reporting, you learn how to stop leaking points unnecessarily. That is a different level of control. So let's condense the protocol. First, stop worshipping the due date as if it's the only date that matters. Second, find your statement closing date. Third, keep utilization under 30% if you want to stay out of the danger zone, under 10% if you want to look strong, and around 1% on one card if you want to optimize hard. Fourth, a few days before the statement closes, manually pay the balance down to the number you actually want reported. Fifth, let the statement cut. Sixth, pay that statement balance by the due date so you pay no interest. That's it. 2 clocks. 1 report. Completely different outcomes. If you keep doing what most people do, the system will keep judging you based on your messiest moment of the month. And then you'll keep acting surprised when your score moves in ways that don't match how responsible you feel. Or you can learn the timing, control the snapshot, and make the report reflect the person you actually are. One path leaves you reacting to the algorithm. The other puts you in charge of what the algorithm sees. That difference is bigger than a few points. A few points can change your loan pricing. Loan pricing changes your lifetime cost. And lifetime cost changes one thing people rarely talk about enough: freedom. Because every unnecessary point you lose can make borrowing more expensive. Every expensive loan reduces flexibility. Every reduction in flexibility reduces your options when life changes. So this is not just about gaming a score. It's about protecting your future choices. Here's the one action I want you to take today. Pick one credit card, open your last statement, find the closing date, and put a reminder in your calendar for 3 days before it. Just do that. Not 20 steps. 1 step. Because once you know that date, you stop moving through the system blind. And that is where financial control actually starts.